I think these benefits are significant. I think they demonstrate that not only the need for nuclear power, the need for electricity, as well as the need for jobs, the need for economic activity in our community, warrant moving forward on this proposal. I phased the proposal for the simple reason that there's no way we're going to bring somebody in here to do this without having all of us, or the majority of us, agree that this is the right thing to do. And unless we get this land zoned, as I'm requesting it to be zoned, with a vested property right, I don't think we have anything to talk about to people outside the community. I want to close, and I know I've taken a long time, but I also know I'm making a record of this proceeding, and that's why I'm so long-winded. Also, I'm an attorney, and you know how that goes. I want to close by commenting on some of the other objections I've heard about this project. The objection was that nuclear power is highly subsidized by U.S. taxes. A February 2011 report by the Union of Concerned Scientists, the same anti-nuclear group I mentioned before, states that nuclear power was not viable without tax subsidies, and the report said it presented for the first time the full range of subsidies that benefit the nuclear power sector. Now, there's no author listed on this report, okay? But that's what the report says. This is the first time anybody's ever put all this information together. Well, apparently the author didn't look at the 2008 study by the Management Information Services, Inc. that looked at all federal incentives for not just research and development, all federal incentives to power development in the United States from 1950 to 2006, a 56-year period, and this is what they found. The largest incentive category was tax concessions. That was the biggest, especially for oil, but also for wind. There were no tax concessions in that 56-year period for nuclear. The total tax support paid for nuclear power over this 56-year period was $65 billion. Compare that to $50 billion for wind, solar, and geothermal, and $93 billion for coal, and $436 billion for oil and gas. So I don't think it's the most highly subsidized U.S. power source, based on the facts as they are true. A couple of other things I want to mention about this. That $65 billion spent for nuclear was not for nuclear power, but was for research and development in nuclear energy. That's what it went for. It went to the universities in this country studying that subject. The nuclear power industry is the only power generating industry that actually pays the government for the privilege of producing power. There is a thing called the waste fund, the nuclear waste fund, that every time a nuclear power plant operates, for every kilowatt hour generated, money goes to the federal government for that fund. Today there is $18 billion in that fund, just sitting there because it's a requirement of law. Coal doesn't do it, oil doesn't do it, gas doesn't do it, wind doesn't do it, solar doesn't do it, the nuclear power industry does it. For the fiscal year 2007, the United States paid energy subsidies in millions of dollars as follows. For renewables, $4,875 million. Refined coal, $2,370 million. Gas, $2,148 million. Nuclear, $1,267 at the bottom of the pack. I'm just pointing this out, that some of the things you're going to hear in opposition to this aren't factually based. U.S. tax subsidy per unit of production, and this is a measurement of dollars per megawatt hours. For coal, $29.81. For solar, $24.34. And this should be of interest to everybody. These are your tax dollars, as well as mine. For wind, $23.37. For nuclear, $1.59. I will acknowledge, gas was cheaper, 25 cents. Okay? But all those other forms of energy, way more expensive than nuclear. A second objection. The U.S. government has $54 billion in loan guarantees to the nuclear industry, and it is estimated that 60% of these loans would be in default. This was a stated objection at the Planning Commission. I want to point out, these are not loans, they're guarantees. They're guarantees of up to 80% of the cost of a nuclear power plant. Now, none of these guarantees have been taken out at this point in time. And that's because there was a front-end loan fee of 12.5% of the amount of the loan that the United States government tacked on, and nobody wanted to borrow money with that kind of a loan origination fee. But Congress is currently rethinking that. And it's pure speculation that 60% of these guarantees will be called upon. I mean, they haven't even been made, and people are proclaiming as fact that 60% are going to go into default. I also want to mention that the U.S. government has loan guarantee programs for renewable energy, for clean coal, for energy efficiency projects that far exceed the loan guarantee programs for nuclear power plants. There's another objection. Farm products will become unmarketable if grown next to a nuclear power plant. There's no evidence in the world that that is a fact. France still grows grapes and makes wine and sells it. The EPA regulates water emission, and all the water that comes out of a nuclear plant has to meet the EPA standards or better than, and that's what it does. There's no radiation that comes out in the water that's damaging to health or property or produce. Produce is grown and livestock are raised right next to nuclear power plants in California. I've got a picture in the documents I gave you of the Diablo nuclear power plant, and in the front of the picture are sheep grazing, because they let the people that raise sheep graze their sheep, and they do that. Another objection I want to address is that land values will be lower. Again, that's an unreasonable fear. This was raised on the radio program that I had last year, and one of the people called up and said, my land values are going to go to blazes. I said, why don't you get on the phone and call real estate people around nuclear power plants in the United States and ask them what happens to the land around nuclear power plants. That's what I challenged the person to do. Well, a realtor in town did do that and reported to me that the people around 5 nuclear power plants, the realtors that person called around 5 nuclear power plants, all said the land values go up. Why do they go up? Because the taxes go down and because people want to live close to where they work. In closing, and this is closing, I know you're all happy about that. Nothing we do in this world is risk-free. But we need to put the risks into perspective. In balance, a clean energy park would benefit our community for the next 100 years. We need electric energy in this country for our future growth and stability. The ground on which this is located is ideally suited for that. There are 2 high-voltage power lines that go right through it. There are 2 gas lines that go right through it, forming corridors of power to get the power out. I'm told by people a lot smarter than I am that the power from this site, with the existing lines that are there, could go anywhere in the United States, south, north, east, or west. There are, let me continue. Cheap energy is a key element in economic development. Without cheap energy, we can't have it. Your actions on this request will not bring this project into being tomorrow, as this is a long-term project. The energy will be needed even more when the Clean Energy Park is created and in operation. We will need more jobs then, as much if not more than we need them today. And we'll need the tax revenue even more then than we need it today. Your decision on this proposal, I don't think, is just about whether or not a clean energy park or a nuclear power plant should be built in the Pueblo. It's really about what kind of a community do we want to have for our children and our grandchildren. Will this decision be made based on fear or uncertainty? Or based on the belief that with American ingenuity, we can solve the engineering challenges of the nuclear age and harness its power? Will we look to the past or look to the future? Your decision today is also going to communicate to the world outside of Pueblo whether or not we as a community believe in taking reasonable, measured risks for the benefit of our children and our grandchildren to ensure economic growth and great job opportunities. I want to also make you aware, I believe the decision you're going to make on this application will receive national attention. ABC News National, CBS News National have contacted me. They're concerned and interested in your decision. And I think they're using it as a bellwether to see what is the United States reaction to what is happening in Japan. What is your reaction? What is a small town's reaction to what is happening in Japan? I believe there could be tremendous negative consequences, not just to nuclear energy in the United States, but to this community's reputation in the United States for economic growth in the future, should this application be denied. As much energy as I put into this project to date, I would rather you deny the application than not grant it wholeheartedly as the right thing to do for this community. And I say this sincerely. I say that because each of you, as well as all of the leaders of this community, are going to have to stand up and be counted if you want this to happen. This is the first of 100 steps that has to take place to bring a clean energy park to our community. I want to thank you for your attention, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
I have a question, Mr. Banner. I know that you're limited liability, and I know that it takes resources to have and begin a liability corporation. But, you know, I have a staff report here where the county has already, in phase 1, provided $15,355.44 phase 1. I call that to your attention because also the staff report also indicates that you are not willing to pay, your company is not willing to pay for work that Pueblo County does. And I, as you know, a keeper and a steward of the taxpayer money, I have to ask you that how do we propose to keep this going and allow the Pueblo taxpayers to fund this project?
Thank you for the question. I haven't seen that staff report.
There's 2 staff employees as well as staff, the P&D support staff. We also have an attorney's fee, and the total comes, as I said, to $15,355.
May I see that?
Sure.
Okay, now I see what it says. $15,355.44 allocated to staff time and attorney's time. So it's all labor. What I would say in response to that is this. From my perspective, I don't have a problem with this expense going into phase 2. I don't have any problem including it as part of phase 2. But what this says to me, and the way I wrote the application, as you know, I said there's a $100 fee that I'm submitting to you. I believe that if this county wants this to happen, this county has to stand up and be counted. I can assure you, I've got way more time and way more expense in this than this. Again, this is the first time I've seen it, and I'm not keeping track of my hours. But I can assure you, I've got more than $10,000 in real cash and way more time, dollar-wise, in that. That's my contribution to something that I think is good for the community. And you are stewards of this community's resources. I recognize that. But I also think you do a lot of things to promote this community, which is great. I'm proposing this to promote this community. And I believe that it would be fair for you to stand with me if you approve of this and move forward. That's kind of my response to that.
Thank you. Water. When we know that it takes an exorbitant amount of water for these plants. How does Pueblo County recoup water or cost, or how are we going to be paid back for this water that's being used? I mean, we know it's in exorbitant amount of water.
First of all, the amount of water consumed using a hybrid nuclear power plant would be about 1/10 of what Comanche uses. Secondly, whatever amount of water is used will be paid for. It isn't, this is water that the plant operator will pay the people that sell the water for that water. And that water goes right back into the stream bed after it's cooled. So the water is, the consumptive use for this water is about 1,250 acre feet. Okay, the consumptive use. Uses a lot of water to cool. But that water just goes right back into the steam, into the riverbed. The consumptive use is augmented, and that augmentation water will be purchased either from the Board of Waterworks or Agua or other providers of augmentation water. But that's an operating cost.
You know, we know that this plant is going to generate more electricity than Pueblo could ever use. You know, and I guess the question that was raised to me, and it's a question that I had as well, is, you know, when we sell this power, you know, how much of that is Pueblo County going to see? You know, we have Xcel Energy. Xcel Energy provides power to everywhere else other than Pueblo, other than CFNI. Yes, they brought a lot of jobs to Pueblo, and brought some economic into the community. But now they sell all of their power to someone else, and Pueblo County sees none of it.
One of the requirements in the bid process for the company I select will be that they agree to sell power to Pueblo County, both San Isabel Electric and our Black Hills, because Black Hills is our local provider, at the same price that they sell it, the cheapest price they sell it to anybody else in the country. So they will be required to do that. Now you have to understand power is a little funny. There are long-term contracts for power. The city just entered into, I think, a 20-year contract with Black Hills. So Black Hills may not be able, the city may not be able to use that power for 20 years. This power plant will be on the grid for 60 to 80 years. So I believe the way I'm structuring this is that power can be bought by both the city and the county providers if they can do it.
I guess, Mr. Banner, what I'm trying to get to is that Pueblo County doesn't really see a profit from that power that is being sold to other communities.
Gotcha. And to the extent power is sold to other communities, the 12 interest groups I had up here before will benefit. And the community will benefit from the jobs, and the community will benefit from the sales tax that those jobs generate also.
I wanted to follow up with a few questions, Mr. Banner, just based solely on the evidence and testimony you gave here today. A couple of questions, again, just based strictly on your presentation. You had mentioned this council that would administer the funds that come from the utility fee would be made up of 3 individuals selected by you, 2 from the city and 2 from the county. I would suggest to you that you go back and take a look at the 4 representatives from city and county, and instead of dividing it in that way, that you have community members on that council, because most of the growth that's taking place is in fact in the county. The operation, should this board approve that, would be in the county. It's also in a very sensitive area of the county, and I would suggest to you that you may want to revisit that, particularly since this application, if approved, would have to be approved by the county commissioners, that you have representatives from throughout the community, to include the city as well, but I'm not sure I would put that kind of demarcation. So I ask that you take a look at that. Second, you had talked about changes in technology in the future. You brought up your iPhone on that. Is there any discussion about going from a fission plant to a fusion plant? Is that technically possible, or are those 2 different kinds of animals?
They're 2 different kinds of animals. Everybody would like fusion, but nobody's figured out how to do it. So at this point in time, there's no nuclear power plant based on that.
You had mentioned Mr. Hall, Neil Hall, and happy to hear about Davis Bacon wages, but I suspect he may be more happy to hear about a project labor agreement. And I just suggest that to you, that should a plant be built, that may be something that we would want to look at. That's not new to Pueblo County, as you know. Excel had a project labor agreement, and that was $1.5 billion project, smaller than what you're talking about. But half of that $1.5 billion went into wages and went into training programs for folks here. So there was benefit to that to this community, while the rest of the country and the state was going through a very severe recession. Ours was not quite as bad because of that $650 million that was funded to the community through Excel. So I would suggest that would be something that we're talking about should this be approved. And to follow up on Commissioner Nunez's question, and this may be a PUC question, but rather than just charging the Pueblo community the cheapest rate that it would charge nationwide, I would suggest that this community should be the beneficiary of a discount of some sort. We feel like we have not necessarily had fair treatment from our, that's probably incorrect. We haven't had equity in treatment with Excel and Black Hill. And I think that we would like to see something, again, should this be approved, something that benefits the Pueblo community, because I know our economic development folks, when they go out there and try and sell the Pueblo community, have 2 major power plants in this community, and yet we have some of the highest utility rates in the state, and it makes their lives. And we're a long way from this, and I don't know whether this will even be approved. But just based on your presentation, all I'm suggesting to you is we may need to look at something rather than just the cheapest cost. We may need to look at something that's an actual discount for Pueblo residents.
Let me just make one comment about power. We're talking about what's called baseload electric power, baseload. The rates that we pay in this community are all governed by the PUC. And there's nothing I could do to affect that. As much as I would like to, because I pay the same amount that you guys are paying, because I've lived here for 38 years. If there is a possibility of influencing that in favor of this community, you have my assurance I will do everything I can that's legal to do that. Because I believe in that.
And as I said, that may well be a PUC question, but it's something that we need to entertain.
Absolutely.
And the last question I have for you, again, just based on your presentation, and there was some discussion about Mr. Gillespie and your association with him. I would also follow up with that and ask whether Mr. Thornton was part of this project.
No. I was a competitor of Mr. Gillespie and Mr. Davis. And I was able to present to the owner of the land my proposal for how to do this, how to generate community support. And I specifically said that if somebody other than me does this, they're going to be interested in one thing, and that's the profit. And I'm not doing this for the profit short term. I'm doing this because I believe it's good for the community. So Mr. Davis is not part of this.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Banner. Mr. Chair, I have no more questions at this time.
I just have to follow up on Jeff's question a little bit about rebate or
Yes.
a lower rate for Pueblo County residents. If it can't be done through the PUC, maybe we could look at an actual rebate to people that have an electric meter, or without somehow like that, and avoid the PUC if it's possible. And then a technical question is, where would the nuclear fuel come from, saying nothing changes for the next 5 years and the plant gets built? What would it be, what would it come from, state?
50% of all the nuclear fuel used in the 104 nuclear reactors in the United States today comes from Russia. We have a treaty with the Russians that buys their nuclear weapons grade materials, degrades it, and uses it in our nuclear power plants. So we might buy all of it from them, for all I know. Other than that, it would come from different processors of nuclear fuel. And I can't tell you, Mr. Commissioner, exactly where they are located, but there's probably people in this audience that can.
Do you know of any that are It's not produced in the United States at all, is it?
No, nuclear fuel is produced in the
Oh,
United
it
States.
is?
Yeah, it is.
Because I just heard, but there's been a new license issued to, somebody in New Mexico to start enriching.
There is a new enrichment plant in New Mexico that went online last year. They're enriching for the Department of Defense and for research, not for power plants. They're different, same type of technology, but they're not doing it because of the law that says they can't re-enrich fuel in this country.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I think, we have to change tapes.